My name is Vivian Parker. I was 68 when my daughter left her 5-year-old son on my doorstep and never came back. It was a Friday evening in late November, one of those gray days when the air feels too heavy to breathe. Rachel stood there with her little boy beside her, holding a single backpack. "Just for the weekend, Mom," she said, her voice tight, eyes already looking past me toward her car. "I just need a break." Ethan didn't look up. He rocked back and forth on his heels, his small hands pressed hard over his ears, even though everything around us was quiet. His shoelaces were untied, his jacket half-zipped. He looked so small, so fragile, like a boy who had learned the world was too loud for him. I tried to speak, to ask when she would be back, but Rachel was already moving down the steps. "I'll call you Sunday," she said without turning around. The sound of her car engine broke the stillness, then her taillights disappeared down the street. I stood there for a long time, the porch light flickering behind me, Ethan still rocking in place, not making a sound. I had been an elementary school teacher for 35 years. I'd taught reading and science, managed hundreds of children, even had a few autistic students in my classroom. But there were always aides, specialists, routines already in place. I had never done it alone. Standing there with Ethan, I realized I knew almost nothing about living with autism beyond what I'd read in a few training manuals. "Hey, sweetheart," I said softly, kneeling beside him. "Do you want to come inside?" He didn't move, didn't even glance my way. The only sound was the quiet squeak of his shoes on the wooden porch as he rocked back and forth. I lifted his backpack. It was lighter than I expected, too light for a weekend, and opened the door wide. The heater clicked on inside the house. Ethan flinched, hands pressed tighter against his ears. Still, after a few seconds, he walked past me into the living room and crouched in the corner by the bookshelf. I closed the door as quietly as I could, heart pounding, realizing this wasn't going to be a weekend at all. It was the beginning of a whole new life. That first night, I tried to feed him. I made chicken nuggets because Rachel once told me that's what he liked. Ethan took one look at the plate and turned away. I tried pasta, then a sandwich. He pushed everything aside without a word. Finally, I gave him a handful of crackers. He ate 3. I remember standing at the sink afterward, staring at the uneaten food, wondering what kind of grandmother couldn't even feed her own grandson. Bedtime was worse. I tried to help him brush his teeth, but the moment I touched his shoulder, he screamed. Not crying, screaming like my touch burned. I froze, terrified. When I stepped back, he stopped, shaking and gasping for air. "Okay," I whispered. "You can skip it tonight." I tucked him into bed, but he threw the blanket off. When I tried again, he screamed louder, so I left the blanket folded at the foot of the bed and turned off the light. From the hallway, I could hear him humming, a low, steady sound that lasted all night. The next morning, I called Rachel. No answer. I called again that afternoon and again that night. Nothing. I left messages, my voice cracking a little more each time. Days turned into weeks. Ethan stayed silent, eating the same 3 crackers, rocking in the same corner, flinching at every new sound. I didn't know what to do, so I did what teachers do best. I learned. I called a pediatrician, scheduled an evaluation, asked questions until I understood at least the basics. Autism wasn't a single thing. It was a whole world of sensations and rules. I learned Ethan needed structure, sameness, predictability, safety. So I built our days around that. The same breakfast every morning, scrambled eggs and toast cut into neat triangles that never touched on the plate. The same route to therapy, the same show after lunch, no surprises. One morning, I found him lining up his toy cars on the floor by color reds blending into oranges, then yellows, then greens, forming a perfect gradient of shade. It was beautiful, precise, something I hadn't even noticed until I looked closer. "That's amazing, Ethan," I said. He didn't respond, but I thought maybe he heard me. And that was when I began to understand. My job wasn't to teach him to fit into the world. It was to learn how to meet him in his. The weeks turned into months, and by the time Christmas came, I had stopped waiting for Rachel's call. Ethan and I fell into our own rhythm. Mornings were calm if I didn't rush him. I learned to move quietly, to keep the lights soft and the sounds low. He began to eat more, as long as everything on his plate looked exactly the same as yesterday. I kept a small notebook of what worked and what didn't, what foods he tolerated, what sounds upset him, what moments made him retreat. I stopped trying to force eye contact. I stopped saying, "Look at me." I realized he listened best when I didn't demand it. Therapies became part of our lives: speech, occupational, behavioral. Slowly, he began to trust the world again. He'd hum less, eat more, even sit with me on the couch while I read. Sometimes he'd reach for his yellow cup and leave it beside mine, a quiet kind of closeness that didn't need words. 3 years later, on a spring morning while I was making breakfast, I heard his voice for the first time. It was faint, almost unsure. Why did Mom leave? I dropped the spatula. The world seemed to stop. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. He wasn't looking at me, just staring at his notebook, waiting for an answer. She said she couldn't handle it, I whispered. He nodded once, wrote something down, then went back to eating his eggs and toast. I went in the bathroom and cried silently, my hand pressed over my mouth so he wouldn't hear. That day, I promised myself that no matter what Rachel had done, Ethan would never feel abandoned again. His world was small, but it was safe, and sometimes safety is the closest thing to love you can give. Ethan turned 12 the year I noticed how methodical he'd become. He no longer carried toy cars or notebooks filled with scribbles. Instead, he cataloged everything: his meals, his therapy sessions, the dates of his appointments, like an archivist of his own life. One evening, I found him at the kitchen table surrounded by sheets of paper, each covered in neat rows of symbols and short notes. "What are these?" I asked. "Patterns," he said. I smiled. "Of what?" "Everything," he answered simply. He saw order where others saw chaos. He tracked the world the way other children tracked games or friends. I realized his notebooks were his way of making the unpredictable make sense. Then, one summer afternoon, I walked past his room and saw my old laptop open on his desk. Lines of strange text filled the screen: words, numbers, brackets, slashes. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Learning Python," he said, not looking up. I blinked. "Is that for school?" "No, for me." He spent the entire summer there teaching himself to code. While other kids went to camp or played outside, Ethan typed quietly for hours. When I brought him food, he'd thank me without turning his head. By the end of August, he showed me small programs he'd built, tools that sorted files, found duplicates, tracked edits. "Why do you need these?" I asked. "So nothing gets lost," he said. I didn't realize then how much those words mattered. He wasn't just building tools. He was building control, the kind he'd never had when his mother left. Sometimes I'd stand in the doorway and watch him work, focused, calm, precise. There was a stillness in him, but also a quiet power. I used to think autism made his world smaller. Now I saw it was simply different, measured, logical, impossible to deceive. That night, when I turned off the lights downstairs, I saw the glow of his screen under the door. It made me think of a lighthouse, steady, constant, shining in the dark. I didn't know it then, but that light was leading both of us toward a truth the world would one day have to face. By 16, Ethan had turned his quiet obsession into something extraordinary. While most kids his age were worrying about grades or driver's tests, he was perfecting a program that could detect if any document had been altered. He called it ProofLink, but to him it wasn't just code, it was protection. I remember the day he showed me. "Watch," he said, pulling up a text file on his computer. He ran his program, and a string of numbers appeared on the screen. "That's the document's signature. If anyone changes even one letter, the signature changes too." He altered a single word and ran it again. The numbers shifted instantly. "See? It knows." I didn't fully understand, but I understood enough to see how proud he was. "It's brilliant," I told him, and for a brief second, he looked up and smiled. 2 months later, he sold it. A small cybersecurity company paid him $3.2 million for the rights. I nearly dropped the phone when I saw the number in his account. "You're 16, I said. "That's more money than I've made in my entire life." He only shrugged. "It's not about money, it's about truth." A week later, a local news crew came to film a segment, "Teen Genius Creates Breakthrough Verification Software." They asked him what inspired his invention. "I wanted to know what's real," Ethan said on camera. "People lie. Documents don't." When the segment aired, friends called to congratulate us. Neighbors waved when we went outside. But Ethan didn't seem happy. He wasn't angry or overwhelmed, just still, like he was waiting for something. One evening I found him sitting at the table, holding his yellow cup, staring out the window into the dark. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded once. "Just thinking." I didn't press him. I didn't know that 2 weeks later, our doorbell would ring and everything we'd built together would be tested. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Ethan was upstairs working. When I opened the door, my heart stopped. Rachel stood there, 11 years older, sharper around the edges, her hair perfectly styled. Beside her was a man in a dark suit carrying a leather briefcase. "Hi, Mom," she said with a practiced smile. I couldn't move. My hands went cold. "Rachel?" The man stepped forward. "Stephen Walsh. I'm representing Mrs. Cooper. We'd like to discuss Ethan's situation." "His situation?" I repeated. Rachel's eyes flicked past me toward the stairs. "Can we come in?" I should have said no. I should have closed the door. But I didn't. Ethan appeared in the hallway behind me, expression blank, his eyes locked on his mother. "Come in," he said quietly. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Ethan and I had eaten breakfast for over a decade, where we'd sorted school files and therapy reports. Now it felt like a battlefield. Rachel folded her hands and looked at me like she was about to deliver good news. "Mom, I'm ready to be a mother again. Ethan needs guidance, especially with all the money and attention. I think it's time I step back into his life." Her lawyer slid a stack of papers across the table. Custody agreements, financial records, visit logs, every page stamped and notarized. "These documents confirm that my client has maintained consistent contact and financial support," Walsh said smoothly. "She's seeking custody and financial guardianship." I scanned the papers' official seals, signatures, dates. They looked real, but they weren't. "These are fake," I said, my voice shaking. Walsh didn't flinch. "Unless you can prove otherwise, the court will recognize them." My head spun. Rachel just smiled softly like she'd already won. Ethan sat still, his hands folded, eyes unreadable. "Ethan," I whispered, desperate, "what do we do?" He turned to me, calm as ever. "We get a lawyer," he said. Then, after a pause, he added, "And let her talk." I didn't know what he meant. I only knew that my daughter, the one who had vanished, was back, and this time, she wasn't here for love. She was here for the money. 3 weeks later, we were sitting in a county courthouse that smelled of old paper and floor polish. The walls were lined with certificates and the kind of silence that makes you hold your breath. Rachel sat at the front with her lawyer, looking like the perfect mother's soft gray sweater, subtle makeup, hands folded neatly on the table. I sat across from her with our attorney, Linda Reyes, clutching the binder that held 11 years of Ethan's life. When the hearing began, Rachel spoke first. Her voice was smooth, warm, rehearsed. "I visited Ethan monthly when possible, sent money orders regularly, called every week. My mother agreed to keep him for stability while I got back on my feet." Her words fell easily, each detail memorized. She even had specific dates. December 2013, I visited for his birthday. April 2015, I sent $500 for therapy. Every sentence was a lie, but the judge, an older woman named Judge Harrison, nodded, taking notes. Linda leaned toward me and whispered, "Stay calm, let her finish." When it was my turn, I tried to explain the unanswered calls, the empty years, the silence. I showed calendars, receipts, therapy logs, but without official guardianship papers, it all looked informal. I could feel the judge's sympathy fading into doubt. Rachel's lawyer stood again. "Your Honor, my client never relinquished her parental rights. These documents verify consistent support and communication." He laid them out neatly on the evidence table, stamped, notarized, convincing. Judge Harrison studied them carefully. "Mrs. Cooper," she said to me, "do you have proof these documents are forged?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The room blurred. "No, Your Honor," I whispered. Rachel smiled politely. That polite, practiced smile I remembered from when she wanted something. Then Judge Harrison looked toward Ethan. "Young man, do you wish to speak?" Ethan stood slowly. "Yes, Your Honor, I have evidence." The courtroom went completely still. Ethan picked up the small black bag he'd brought, walked to the witness stand, and opened his laptop. "May I connect this to the display?" he asked. The judge hesitated, then nodded. "Proceed." Rachel's lawyer objected. "Your Honor, this is irregular." Ethan's voice cut through, calm and steady. "Your client submitted fraudulent documents 6 weeks ago. I analyzed them using my verification system." He projected the documents onto the screen, the same ones Rachel had brought, and began explaining. "These claim to be from 2011 to 2020, but the metadata shows they were created 6 weeks ago, right after the news story about my sale aired." He clicked to the next screen, timestamps, creation logs, digital fingerprints, all recent. Every document shares the same template ID, meaning they were all made on the same computer. The lawyer stammered, "That data can be manipulated." Ethan didn't look up, not when cross-referenced through a blockchain hash pattern. The pressure patterns in the signatures don't match her originals either. He zoomed in, showing overlays of Rachel's old signature from his birth certificate compared with the new ones. These were forged. The judge leaned forward, studying the screen. "And you created this verification system yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor. It's the same system I sold to Anderson Security for $3.2 million. Rachel's face drained of color. Ethan continued, displaying his records, years of calendars, bank statements, therapy logs. Every date she mentioned, I have proof she wasn't there. No deposits, no calls, no visits. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd ever heard. Finally, Judge Harrison spoke. "I've seen enough." She turned to Rachel, her voice sharp now. "Mrs. Cooper, I find your testimony not credible, and your documents fraudulent. Full guardianship is granted to Vivian Parker. I am also referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation." Rachel's face crumpled. The gavel struck once, it was over. Outside the courthouse, sunlight spilled across the steps. I turned to Ethan, trembling. "You knew," I whispered. He nodded once. "I just proved what was always true." For the first time in 11 years, I let myself breathe. The months after the trial felt quieter than any time before. The house was still, but not empty, just at peace. For the first time, Ethan could breathe without fear that someone would take away what he'd built. Rachel's fraud case went to court quickly. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation and 500 hours of community service at an autism resource center. 3 months later, I went there to drop off donated books and saw her sitting cross-legged down the floor, reading to a small boy who rocked the same way Ethan used to. She looked up, saw me, and froze. I didn't say anything, neither did she, but in her eyes, I saw something that had never been there before. Understanding. The director told me later, not realizing who I was, "That volunteer comes in extra hours. Says she's trying to learn what she should have learned years ago." Ethan's life took a new direction after the trial. The non-compete clause from selling his software meant he couldn't work in data verification for 5 years. So he founded his own company instead, Patternworks, a software testing firm that hired autistic adults. "We see patterns others miss," he said simply when I asked about it. His first hire was Steven, one of my former students. I had fought for that boy years ago when the school board said he wouldn't last in a classroom. Now he was Ethan's lead quality tester. Then came Lily Marcus, and 3 others, each one someone the system had underestimated. One afternoon, I stopped by the office. The space was small, but bright rows of desks, quiet hums of computers, focused faces. Stephen looked up when he saw me. "Mrs. Parker," he said, smiling, "you once told the principal I wasn't broken, just different. Ethan says the same thing every day." I could barely speak. I just nodded, holding back tears. That evening, I brought dinner to Ethan's apartment. The yellow cup, the same one from his childhood, sat on the counter, chipped but still there. As we ate, he put his fork down and said quietly, "I know what you gave up for me." I waited. "You could have sent me away like she did, but you didn't, you stayed." My throat tightened. "You were worth every single day," I told him. He nodded once, his eyes soft. "I know that now." We sat there in silence, side by side, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space between us. For the first time in years, silence didn't mean distance. It meant peace. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it transforms it. I don't know if I've fully forgiven Rachel, but I've learned that the truth has a quiet power of its own. Ethan proved that facts can protect, but love is what saves. When people ask how I managed all those years alone, I tell them this: I didn't raise a genius. I raised a boy who learned that being different isn't a weakness, it's a kind of vision. If you were in my place, could you forgive your own child? Tell me what you think in the comments, share where you're watching from, and subscribe to The Art of Revenge, where we prove that no one is ever too old to start again.